Welcome to another Friday Functions video. This week, I'm excited to share with you Microsoft Flow trigger conditions. And this was provoked by one of my favorite people, John Liu, who posted on Twitter that we now had a new setting to add conditions for triggering. And when he added that Twitter, it went viral. Everybody loved it. And so thank you, John, for always being smart and posting and letting us know about everything that's happening with Flow. And this was actually a gift from Logic Apps. So this shows us the benefit of Microsoft Flow sitting on top of Logic Apps, that sometimes we gain magical goodness just from being built on top of them. So don't take too many notes. I do have a slide. I'm going to post this video along with the PPT on our community at Microsoft Flow in the video gallery so that you can pick it up so you don't have to take a lot of notes. But today, try to figure out kind of what's going on more than trying to memorize formulas, because I'm going to show you a trick so you don't have to memorize formulas either, okay? So now here's what's cool. I've started with a typical business scenario. So I imagine me as the owner of, well, I'm not the owner. I'm a team player in a company that manages listings for Airbnb, for Airbnb sites. So this is lodging that you can go and you can rent. And we manage the list of things that will be posted on the web, as well as what's going to be printed in brochures as to what lodging is available. Now, I want you to focus on the niche case of this one, which is we've decided to break up the work, right? Because we've realized that there should be a different process when it involves an entire house or an apartment versus when it's just a private room and versus when it's a shared room. So the processes behind anything new or anything changed can be impacted by what the room type is. So what I want to do as the Flow maker here is enable Flow to manage the process based on the room type, but also take away any noise from the teams that are not involved in the things that come in that are not their category, or the changes that are made that don't involve what they manage, okay? In this case, I'm going to focus on private room, assuming that I'm the person who manages all the changes as well as the updates to private rooms. Because not only do I have to make sure that this is correct and that the owner, the host, accepts that change, but I also have to get our written brochures or our printed brochures updated, okay? All right, so I'm going to close this up and I'm going to go back to Flow. And I'm going to show you that I've already done a Flow test. And this is what I did. I went to the list a few seconds ago and I changed the price to $110. And then I checked in Flow to see if that triggered the Flow. And you can see that it triggered item number 10496. And see, that's 10496. All these others are not edited today, okay? Now, how did I set up the Flow? Well, I took the basic approach. One, I added the trigger itself, and this is when an item is created or modified, because I need to capture changes and not just creations. And then I set that to the site address and the list name. Okay, and that's basically all I did. I didn't do anything else. And then I added a compose, which is a data operation. If you don't know this one, just type compose when you go to add, and basically it'll give you a data operation called compose, and that's what I added. And then for the dynamic tag of compose, I added the ID from the trigger body, like what, so I could tell which lists triggered the Flow. If ever you look for the ID and you don't see it, save your Flow, add a variable, save your Flow and come back. Sometimes the ID doesn't show up right away, but it will show up. And so I put the ID in the compose, and then I actually went back to the list and changed it. And then I went and checked to see. Now it did take, by the way, it took a full minute for the Flow to trigger. And that's because I don't have a lot of, this is a different tenant and I don't have any upgraded licensing or anything. So that's probably why it took a full minute, or maybe that's the minimum it'll take. to run, and it did trigger as expected, and then it gave me back the ID just because I wanted that clearly pulled out. It is in the output, by the way. If you look at the output of this, you can find the ID. You can even find out what time I did it and all that stuff. So it's kind of cool. All right, now we're going to talk about this new feature and how it impacts this. All right, because basically any change I make to this list will trigger this flow without exception. Now, something I could do if I wanted to is I could add a condition here. And from this condition, I could say room type is equal to private room. Sorry, I don't need any private room. Okay, make sure you're case sensitive here. And so room type is equal to, so this would enable me to, if it triggered, no matter what it triggered on, to only perform a flow action if the room type was equal to private. That gives me an extra step, right? But in addition to giving me an extra step, what it also did was this trigger will trigger no matter what. So there could be 100 things going on in this list that have nothing to do with private room, and then the 101 thing did. And so it'll trigger 101 times until this condition is met, and there we go, we'll finish our flow. What if I don't want it to be triggered unless that condition is met? And that's what the Logic Apps team means when they said trigger condition. And let me show you where this is. So if I go in here and I go into settings, you'll see that there's a new thing here called trigger conditions. And this is exactly what I'm talking about today. So I can add into this area a trigger condition. So I can go in here and add a condition, and then you can steal some code from somewhere else. I'm going to take it from I think I have something in my OneNote or in my deck. So I'm going to go to my deck and I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to teach you how you can cheat to get this code in case you don't know this or this seems overwhelming to you. Hang in there, don't stop the video. Okay, so now I've got this code, this advanced formula really, that says at equals. So now we're saying the operator for this is equals. And then we're looking at the trigger body, and we're specifically looking at the room type column. And we've said if that column contains private room, that must be true for the trigger to fire. Says it really clearly there. This statement must be true for the trigger to fire. So now what will happen is this will only trigger if the room type column has private room. This is very exciting to me. Not only for this scenario, but for many. So I'm going to click done here. And now we're going to save this flow. I'm going to unzoom so we can get back our UI. I'm going to wait for it to say saved. Up. Okay, I think what I did, I'm sorry, I meant to click edit. I'm still in edit. So basically, our wonderful checker found out that there's an error in my expression. So let's go look at our expression up close and see what I did wrong. So we've got equals, trigger body, room type, private room. Looking at it harder. Okay, what does it say here? Ah, seems to want a pair of quotes. Let me just click that again. Oh, I see. One of these quotes, I hope you guys can see this, but one of the quotation marks is slanted. And, you know, it's kind of like it's coming from PowerPoint because I copied from there. And PowerPoint will sometimes convert those quotations to slanted or curly or something like that. And so these have to be straight quotes. They can't be curly, they can't be slanted. So I think usually the best practice is to copy your expressions. If you keep them and you save them in your OneNote, like keep yourself a running list of popular expressions, but then copy them to a notepad and then cut them from notepad and put them here. And the reason is because notepad clears out all that formatting that can break your expression. So a little thing like that can actually break your expression. So I'm glad you saw that, and we troubleshoot. And I want you to know that I never saw that before. And I guess it's because I have never copied from PowerPoint. But it's good that we work through that together. I don't know why this always happens when I do videos, and I think it's because there's somebody out there that cares about you and wants to show you all the things that can happen. All right, so now that we've got that, I'm going to save this. I'm sure that was the problem. Small things like that, right? And I'm not cutting this video. I'm leaving it just as is so you can see. And I'm going to go to my flows, and I'm just going to go here so we can see. So this is the one that I tested before we talked today. Let's go do it again. So now what's interesting about that particular list item is it is not a private room item. Look, it's entire home. So we're going to edit that one again so that we make the price $120. Okay, so that we're going to edit so that's $120. That does not meet our condition though. I'm also going to go, let's wait a few seconds, right? Only reason I'm waiting is because I want you to clearly see that the first one didn't trigger, but the second one did. And so I'm going to just wait a second, and then I'm going to go edit here. And then now this one is oh no, it isn't. Okay, sorry. Let's go find one that is a private room. Here we go. And hit edit. So this one is clearly a private room. So it meets our condition. And I'm going to change this to 150. And we're going to notice that the ID for this is 10485. Okay, hold me accountable. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. So actually what we've done is we have triggered we have changed two list items. Now we're going to wait a full minute here for them to come through. While they're coming through, and this is just because I think, you know, the license that I have will take about a minute for it to actually trigger, but nobody's sitting around waiting for things to trigger. So a minute or even 5 minutes would be awesome, right? So this is the formula or the expression I used today. And just to break this down, the @ sign just says, okay, that's at the beginning of every one. But then I have an equals here because I'm actually saying that in the room type column of the trigger body, and notice all of these start with trigger body question mark. Trigger body, open, close quote, question mark. And that's important because that accounts for any null values, the question mark. And then the trigger body, that's all we're talking about today. We're just talking about trigger bodies, right? So you'll always start your expression somewhere in there will be trigger body, right? So we used equals trigger body, and then we put into brackets the name of the column surrounded by single quotes. Also very important that, especially if there's spaces, yes, you see how that is italic? I'm sorry, that was the other error we had found earlier. Okay, so we said this is the column. And then what's in the column? What do we want it to equal? We want it to equal private room. And you can see that that quotation mark is wrong. So if you want to be sure, you can always copy a good one and then paste it over any bad ones that you see when you're storing these. Because I do store my formulas, because even though I understand how they're done, it's helpful to have a repository of the common used stuff in my OneNote. So I have a OneNote that runs all my most used expressions, a little bit of a blurb of an explanation of how I use them and why I use them. And I'm sure I'm unique to many other people. I'm sure that John's repository of expressions is much more intense than mine, for instance, but everybody keeps what they think they need. All right, so that was the formula that we used, which will force this trigger not to occur until private room is what is the value of room type. And so let's go back and see what happened. We're going to just refresh. I waited a minute. And notice we only have one triggered. Now, I did the one that's not compliant to our condition first. So we know if the second one occurred, that first one did not trigger. So the ID for the one that triggered this flow is 10485. So if I go back here, and that one is compliant. But notice we did not have a trigger before that, other than the one I did before this call, right? So this is what's exciting. This did not trigger until it met the condition. So the first time it had no condition. That was before I met with you and started the video. And then I did another one that didn't meet the condition, and notice it's not listed here. Okay, now we might find it in checks. Let's check. So here are our runs. So these are the only 2 runs, but we also have something called checks, where we can pick up checks that will actually determine what happened. And so it will come up in checks, okay? It didn't fail, it just caused it to skip, all right? So that may happen. And I haven't done a lot of testing with checks, but at least I know I got 2 triggers here. The one that I didn't have a condition in, and the one that met my condition. Now, I want to help you build these conditions, and I want to show you a little trick. And this is the trick. I use a lot of tricks sometimes because I don't adore writing code in any way, and I'm very much a web design level coder, so like HTML, that kind of stuff. And so when you get into JSON and some of these more advanced concepts, I can have some challenges too. So I've learned how to cheat. So let me show you one thing you can do. Look, I'm going to add a get items here. Now what's interesting is, remember I told you you could use condition after you get something triggered. You could use a condition. Back in the day, and I'm not sure how long ago this was actually, but back in the day, I could type room type here and then put private room over here. Didn't have to worry about quotation marks at all, which is, I love the way the condition works. And then we had an advanced, like a way to look at it in advance. And I don't see that anymore, and we don't have a peak code. What I liked about advanced is it would show me what the formula is. So I found another way to do that. So if I go in here and I do get items, so I do have to get the items first in this case, because I'm looking for an array, and this is only one item right now. So if I link this array to the same list, and then after it I add a filter array. There's probably a couple of ways to cheat, but this is one way you can cheat right away. Then I put the get items in there as the value, and now I can do the same, sorry, I didn't mean to type. Now I can do that same condition. Room type is equal to private, sorry, I don't need any quotes in here, private room, okay? And by the way, these conditions do need to be case sensitive, so check your list, all right? Now this one does have the get in advanced mode, and guess what? There's my formula. Now, the only thing that's wrong with this formula, otherwise it's perfect, is that it looks at the item. So I can come in here into my settings, paste this in. The only thing I have to change is trigger body, right? And which is a lowercase t and an uppercase b. And if you forget that, look up, because that is actually part of the split on setting, okay? Trigger body. That's a good way to cheat to get your formula. So I'm good at hacking and cheating. That's one of my favorite 2 things to do. And it works just as well as if you had known that formula. So you'll have to delete these 2 things, but this is the way I figured out, how can I cheat and get that value in some easy way? And so I just add a get items. I use the same list and column so that I have the same choices for my dynamic fields. And then I can use this to just put it out there in English, and I can hit this to get the formula. You just have to remember to change item to trigger body, because this filter array is against this array right here, which is an item. So let's go back to the PowerPoint for a minute and look at some other examples of this. In case you don't want to cheat and you want to be an expert, here are some samples that you might like. So the first one we did, okay, I don't know, I guess I didn't have to zoom, did I? Okay, we did the first one, which is room type. I just wanted to use a laser pointer. Yeah, we did the first one, which was room type equal to private room. Remember, the equals is your operator. And then all of them start with trigger body and question mark accounting for null values. Then you have in brackets and single quotes the name of the column. I would suggest you always use single quotes, whether it's a one word or two. I know in other applications we learned to only need them when we have a space in the middle. Always use single quotes, even if it's a single word. And if you're using a dynamic field, they would be in the single quotes too. And then you can't use dynamic fields in this condition though. I just want to say that. So then we're going to say private room, right? So that's the format. And I have it up here, @ operator, trigger body, question mark, then column, and then value. But none of these quotes would be slanted, okay? Remember to keep those straight quotes. And then the second thing is, what if you have a yes, no value, like it's a Boolean value? So if in SharePoint it says yes, no, then you would use true, false in here. So it would be equals trigger body, rentable equals true, which means there's a column that's yes, no. We'd want to say true. You can also reverse these and say not equals, but then notice how we actually have the equals nested inside of a not. So not equal to trigger body, column, rentable, value, true, would give us any that were false. We could also put false here, of course. Contains is a common one that I like to use, where you want to say there's a column called neighborhood. This is probably a text column. I want to confine everything that contains central. And then finally, I have more than one thing by using and. You can also use or, right? So and means both conditions have to be true, not just one. So in this case, I'm looking at the neighborhood. If it doesn't contain centro and also doesn't contain campo, then this becomes true. But that's an and statement. If I wanted it to be or, so if it doesn't contain centro or it doesn't contain campo, then I would use or there. I suggest you practice with and or because they can be tricky, especially for people who are unfamiliar with operators and expressions. So practice. If you practice for just do a few examples, make up yourself a couple examples and then practice for 15 or 20 minutes, you will become an expert in an hour. Then we have greater or equal to. So greater or equal to, and in this case, I've used a date. So I've taken the created date because I want to see the last 7 days. So if the item itself was created in the last 7 days, now where is this useful? Let's suppose you kicked off an approval on an item, and then after you kicked off that approval, which happened on creation, somebody changes the list item. Uh-oh, you need to be notified that list item has been changed. And what you can do is notify the approver that something has changed, right? So that if they've already approved, they can go back and review that and, raise a red flag that change may make a difference to their decision. Also, suppose you want to just know, oh, okay, last week we've already sent it to finance, right? We've already sent this data, but somebody just changed it. Maybe we need to, re-notify them. So that kind of thing is useful. And then finally, I have the trigger body where it's a lookup value. So in this list, this list is in a different list in SharePoint where I have a lookup column to the contractor company. This is my change order list. Remember I showed you that before, I think. That column looks up to another list called contractor. And so the column in the list has a value and an ID value. You want the value here if you want the value. So if you want to know in this list, does the lookup column equal contractor A, then make sure you add the value here. So every other one didn't have anything after the column name. But with lookups, you'll have to add another question mark, and then you'll add the bracket, and you'll either put value or ID, depending on what you want to evaluate. If you put value, then you'd have text here. But if you put ID, then you could put an ID number here. You could put a literal ID number. Whenever you're using numbers, I should have done a greater than for the pricing column. But okay, I'll give you that challenge. Create this function that would only trigger if the pricing column was over $100. How about we do that? Okay. Now put the video on pause and go and try and write that equation. Okay. So we want an equation that will only trigger if the pricing, the column's name is pricing, if the pricing column is over 100. So let me just show you that. Here's a price column over here, and there are some values in here that are under $100. But I only want it to trigger when the price is over 100. How would you write that formula? Pause the video and try and write it, and then we'll do it together. And maybe we'll use my trick, all right, to check ourselves. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to show you exactly what I would do. So I would go to settings here, and I would change the column to the column that's called pricing. Now, this is the internal column. Watch yourself, guys. This is called price. So let's just make sure we put the right column name. All right, so it's called price. If I go into the list settings, I'm going to actually click on price to check that the internal name is price. And you'll see that in the URL at the top of the page for the column called price. You will see at the end of the URL field equals and the word price. So always use the internal name in these advanced functions. All right, so I'm going to use price, and this time I don't need any quotes because it's a number. Numbers don't need quotes. I'm just going to say 100. So this is what I think the formula should be. Let's try our cheat and see if it says the same thing. So I'm going to put this back into advanced mode, and I'm going to pick my pricing column. Price, sorry, I keep getting the column name wrong. And then I'm going to say is greater than, oh, I have to change that too. I think I left equals. I want is greater than 100. Okay, now I'm going to edit in advanced mode. And notice I was really, really close. The only thing I forgot was the greater, right? But notice that the 100 doesn't have any quotes around it. So I was right. So this is a great way to check your formulas. I kind of wish we could do it with a condition because condition allows you to put more than one. But I'm going to go back into settings, and the only thing I'm going to change here is that I can actually put that in there. And remember that when you use my cheat, you have to change item to trigger body, okay? Whenever you use that cheat, you new users that want to use that cheat, have fun with it. But remember to change item to trigger body, okay? Let's hit done here. I don't need any of this extra stuff. That was us cheating. So when you do cheat, take those extra steps out, right? They were just there to help you figure out the formula. So go ahead and take them out, get rid of them so that you can, have the minimum number of steps. Before I publish this or before I let other people know this is ready to be used or whatever, I might actually even remove the compose because this is really just helping me test. It's so I don't have to go peek at all that JSON. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save. And now it's saving. I'm going to wait till it's done saving, however long that might take. And then we're going to go back to the SharePoint site. Let's see, did we close it? We sure did. So, and did you get the right formula? Did you actually pause and try and do this? I hope you did. I really hope you did because it's kind of fun to test your own knowledge. And also let me know in the comments below if I'm teaching you in a good way that you understand, especially new users out there who don't know this as well as some of the John Lius and Serges out there who basically we all follow. Okay, so let's go find my list. Okay, oh, Did I get to the wrong site? Let's go find my list. Hold on one second. Okay, there's two. Look at that. Okay, so SharePoint. I don't want the red one. I want the blue one. There we go. And then I'm going to click on lodging. And then so let's go ahead and do some more changing. So we want to change something under $100 first. And the reason is because you'll see the runs in the order that they occur. So this is my way of proving that it didn't trigger. So this one is $25, so it's less than 100. And I'm just going to make this $75 and save. Still less than 100. Now I'm going to get this one that's 180, right? And so these are list IDs 489 and 488. 180 is above 100. So I'm going to change that to 190 and save. So basically one of those two met our condition and one of them didn't. So what our compose should only say is 10488. All right. Again, sometimes we do have to wait a full minute. And how much time you wait, that totally depends on a bunch of things, like how fast is everything running today? What plan do you have? How did you configure it? There's a lot of factors that can determine what's the number of retries. All that kind of stuff contributes to how long this run may take to trigger. So I'm actually going to go back to the PowerPoint for a minute and just review these while we wait a minute. So the big change I wanted to make on this page is that these should never be slanted. So, and if I have to tell you how many times that has been the reason for something not working, you would be surprised, right? Oh, I made a mistake. I pasted in there. Okay, so you want a straight quote. And if you ever see a crooked quote, get rid of it, so make sure you use a sans serif font if you're, copying from somewhere, or just remember to check them. So all I did was copy a good one and I'm just pasting them here like this, right? Those quotes can be a little challenging if you don't catch that. And the error message, if you go back, just do a return, rewind, and go back to that place where I got that error message. What you want to note is it starts talking about syntax, missing quote or something like that. When you see it talking about syntax, check that you have your commas in the right place and your quotes in the right place. And usually that's all you need to worry about. You don't actually have to understand that whole error message to catch that it's talking about syntax, okay? I suggest you always read your error message. I know that sometimes they can be quite intimidating, but read them anyway, because sometimes you'll catch keywords in there that'll tip you off as to what's going on. All right. So let's go back. Let's go back and see what's going on. I'm just going to refresh this. And you see we have only one triggered, right? We edited two things, but we only have one triggered. If I go in there and I open the compose to find out which one, it was 10488. And that was the one that was over 100. So this is a great feature. I know you can think of thousands of ways to use it. I hope that this video also gave you some tips, especially if you're new to expressions and the expressions are pretty overwhelming. You'll still be able to use those expressions, all right? Reach out if you have questions. I really hope you enjoy your experience in the Power Platform, and I look forward to talking to you soon.